Hello and welcome to today's webinar on how to scale your IoT solution. My name is Jeremy Cowan. I am the co-founder of IoT Now, and it's my real pleasure to be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us around the world for this webinar, which is brought to you with our partners, Eris. Today we're looking at a really important set of issues such as maximizing IoT solution performance globally, how to control costs, and just as importantly, we'll be talking about securing your deployment, all within the premise how to scale your IoT solution. So let me introduce you to our very experienced speaker and someone who will be familiar to regular attendees at our webinars. He is, of course, Evan Whitelock, Product Manager at Eris. It's really good to have you here again, Evan.
Great to be here, Jeremy. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. And today, with your help, we're going to discuss some key considerations and also common barriers as you grow your connected business. Now, don't forget, as usual, this webinar is being recorded. And from tomorrow, you can access the audio and slides just by going to our website, which is iot-now.com. In a few minutes, we'll also be asking for your views. So we'll have 3 quick polls happening during the presentation. And finally, at the end, I'll be putting your questions to Evan. So you can start sending me your questions right now. In fact, I see people have already started sending them, which is excellent. Just type them into the window on your screen, and we'll discuss as many as time allows. Of course, any that we don't get to, we will pass on to Eris, and they can come back to you offline. Of course, if you're having any technical issues with audio or slides, you can also use the question window just to get help from our tech support team. So let's not delay. Evan, it's over to you.
All right, thank you so much. So we will go ahead and jump right in. So yes, today, as Jeremy laid out, we're talking about scaling IoT solutions. Obviously something that has many separate components to it. And so we're going to break that down a little bit and talk about what some of the key considerations should be as you look to take your successful deployment into something that's even more successful at a larger scale. So before we dive in, just a quick about Eris for those of you who don't maybe aren't familiar with us or why I'm here talking to you guys today. So we are an IoT technology provider. We focus primarily on providing cellular connectivity, where we provide global cellular connectivity to companies building IoT solutions across pretty much every vertical. Separately, we do have the Eris Mobility Suite, which is an application platform for the Internet of Moving Things, everything from commercial connected vehicles to two-wheelers to other moving assets. But today we're coming from the connectivity side and looking at how connectivity can impact a company's ability to scale. And when we talk about scale, this is something that we've been doing for quite a bit. I had mentioned, sure, we do have global connectivity. We provide it to customers all around the world. But we manage over 15 million units today and have several individual customers that have up over 1 million units themselves and have guided them through a lot of these challenges that we're going to be talking about today. So something that we are familiar with for, speaking from experience here today, as to some of the pitfalls that prevent companies from truly being able to reach their revenue goals with scaling their IoT solution. So today, as we break it down, we're going to be talking about it in kind of 3 key buckets. The first one is how to go about maximizing your solution performance globally. And, the key concept there obviously is going to be, having a finely tuned machine, right, if you will, that's going to perform the way that it's designed to everywhere in the world is what you want to get to, but it's not always something that's easy to do. Global coverage comes into play there. Many other things come into play there. And so what can you be doing ahead of time, pre-deployment, but also post-deployment that can make that easier for you? Second, obviously, costs are the name of the game in IoT, and managing your costs is what's going to allow you to grow your business in a reliable and scalable way, in a predictable way. And it's the cost, the unseen or the hidden costs, the unexpected costs are what derail so many companies as they're building out these deployments. And then lastly, we're going to talk about security, which is becoming a big deal in IoT for a lot of obvious reasons, and largely because when not dealt with, the potential impacts of a security breach can be crippling for many organizations. And so securing your deployment as you look to scale and start sending devices to larger, in far off regions becomes critically important to make sure that you have a business that can continue to grow and scale. So those are kind of the three key buckets that we're going to be talking about. And what I want to, just kind of set a little bit more context on is, kind of make an assumption about where many of you are coming from. And if you're looking to scale a solution, that means you're probably you've got a solution out there. You started to see some levels of success, whether it be local success, whether it be regional, across a certain number of countries, and you're looking to expand that even further. I think it could also apply if you have an existing business of selling a product, and you have seen a successful pilot, a successful set of testing, and you're looking to grow that to your entire business and implement that across all the other devices that you're selling on a regular basis. Obviously, then you're trying to take a connected solution and put it in an already scaled business. You're going to encounter a lot of the same things. And some of the barriers we've seen for companies that are looking to do from any of these starting points, first and foremost, the ability to sell and deliver product in new regions, whether that's new countries, new languages, new distribution channels. That isn't going to be as much of the focus today because that's so really business specific in terms of how you're set up, how your specific sales systems and processes are all set up. And so what we're going to then is assume that those are things that are being addressed in separate conversations. Those are things that you either have figured out or are going to figure out. And we're going to talk about some of these other pieces that are common barriers. Picking the right enabling technologies. Will they allow you to scale to where you need to go? For the purposes of today's conversation, coverage, right? Do you have coverage in the areas where you're going to be looking to deploy? On the operational side, which is critically important, and we're going to get into this quite a bit, do you have the operational tools to support 100,000 devices, 200,000 devices, 1 million devices, especially for those of you coming from a smaller set of deployments today? Do you have a control over a cost structure, and are those costs predictable that you can rely on as you scale? The costs will scale linearly as opposed to exponentially. And then lastly, security. Do you have the right safeguards in place to protect your deployment as you grow? And before we get into a lot of the next ones, we have a poll question really quick, and I'm going to toss it over to Jeremy, but want to get a little feedback on how which of these barriers you guys find most important to you. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Jeremy to run us through the first poll.
Thank you very much. The question, as you'll see on your screen, is what common barriers are the largest challenge for your business as you look to scale? Is it enabling technologies? Is it operational capacity and tools? Is it predictable costs or security? So what are the common barriers that are the largest challenge that you find when you're looking to scale? So Evan, we're starting to see a pretty representative sample coming through there. 36% are saying enabling technologies. It's fluctuating around the 33 to 36%, but that seems to be where it's peaking at the moment, and a similar strength for both operational capacity and predictable costs. Was that what you were expecting?
Generally, yes, and I think that I'm not surprised that the enabling technologies, and especially again, so much of today we're going to talk about the coverage, are what people generally think of as the first thing that they need to figure out. Obviously, if I want to deploy a device in the United States, for example, I need to make sure that I have coverage access in the United States. Otherwise, that device can't be deployed. And I'm very glad to see that, because a lot of what we're going to talk about next is how some of those other capabilities actually have a bigger impact on your ability to scale. And so, we know that the coverage is obviously, first and foremost in a lot of people's minds, but there's a lot of other things. So I think that we're going to shed some light on some of those other things coming up here pretty quick. So I think that's a good alignment.
Okay. Well, look, let's move on from that. And I seem to be having a technical problem with removing that poll, so I will try and do that another way. There we go. Back to your slide.
There we go. Okay. So the first bucket that I mentioned that we're going to go into is maximizing solution performance and doing it globally. And now we're going to touch on what a lot of you hinted at with the poll, which is the concern over coverage, the enabling technology. And so much of that is has such an impact on solution performance. Obviously, you need coverage where you want to go, and that coverage has to work. Otherwise, the device is not going to be able to send the data that it needs to. The solution won't work the way that it needs to, and you've got big problems that are going to prevent you from selling, deploying, and making money on these solutions. So I want to provide a little context on coverage first and talk about how it can have a big impact on solution performance. First and foremost, coverage selection and technology selection is really difficult in today's world, largely because the cellular world is very fragmented across different technologies. We see that LTE is pretty widely available. For those of you familiar with 2G and 3G around the world, you know that those are very widely available, but they're starting to be shut down in various parts of the world. Many countries have already started the 2G shutdown. Many countries are well past the 2G shutdown. And in other regions like Europe, for example, 2G is expected to be around until around 2025. So there's some time there left. But if you're looking to deploy a device that's going to be out in the field for anything longer than the next 3 to 5 years, LTE or one of the new technologies like LTE-M or NB-IoT is where I highly recommend you start looking. LTE coverage is in most places of the world today. LTE-M and NB-IoT are lagging pretty significantly behind, and they're moving at different speeds. A couple stats here from the GSMA. LTE-M is only being deployed in 46 countries right now. NB-IoT is only in 96. And even those deployments are not true nationwide coverage yet in most cases. And so it makes getting a single SKU, a single SIM card on LTE-M or NB-IoT that can operate everywhere, it makes it very difficult. In a separate webinar, we could probably get into options there and how you can leverage 2G fallback to complete that coverage footprint today. But if you're looking to scale quickly, reliably with something that's going to be around for a long period of time, LTE, regardless of your bandwidth requirements, is is probably the best option for most applications today in a truly global deployment, which I'm assuming that many solutions looking to scale are going to do so on a global scale. And so, obviously the impact there, the inability to get a single SKU has implications on your supply chain, on your inventory, on your sales process and product delivery processes, because you need to make sure that the right devices are going to the right region so that they can connect to the networks that they're supposed to connect to. It does introduce some operational complexities in the supply chain, and so getting down to the lowest number of SKUs, the lowest number of devices, is something that's very important. And the more, a common theme we'll hear today is that simplicity helps drive scale, and the more simple you can make your processes, the better. And so driving towards that single SKU, one of the reasons why we recommend LTE today is because you can get to that point. But it's, at the end of the day, it's a murky landscape, and don't be afraid to look for partners that can help you navigate it. There are a lot of companies like we live and breathe this every day. And if you have questions about your specific needs, please reach out and ask. These companies like ourselves are more than happy to provide our thoughts and expertise on what we're seeing. But when we look at coverage and the impact on solution performance, so as I mentioned, with LTE, global coverage is possible. Reliable global coverage is going to make sure your devices continue to perform at that high level that they're supposed to. That is possible with LTE. And you can get that on a single SIM. Simplify your devices, single SIM card, single APN, and so forth, make your supply chain simpler, but also have that reliability of established LTE networks that will provide coverage that you truly can rely on. One of the challenges that you will see as you evaluate global SIM card providers, though, is that in many cases they're going to have access to several networks in any given country. And this is just a quick map that shows, from our perspective, where we have, the depth of coverage of our global SIM card, and we have global connectivity across multiple carriers in most countries. Where this has the biggest impact on solution performance is in any given country, and especially as you deploy to different parts of the world where certain networks may not be reliable as the network right next to it. I give the example in the United States, AT&T and Sprint, obviously they're both very large networks, very large companies, very reliable networks. If you go into other countries, though, the number one carrier and the number two carrier, there may be a big difference in terms of the reliability of their network or how they've deployed their cell towers. It's just not entirely standardized across the whole world. So when you look at a global SIM, how coverage can have such an impact on your solution performance, and what you need to consider is SIM cards that provide steering abilities to a better performing network on that roaming list. And do you have the ability, if in any given country, network one is having a connectivity issue, having an outage, having a temporary outage, or is just not that reliable, do you have the abilities from an operational standpoint to push that SIM to another carrier in that same region to get it back online and working properly? So much of, and one of the key themes throughout what we talk about today, so much of the ability to scale is the ability to solve problems as you go. Because with cellular networks, problems will happen. And we're going to take a look at that in a second here. But it's never as simple as just put a device out there, and because it worked once, it's going to continue to work once. Any of us, we all have cell phones. We're all used to using Wi-Fi with our computers. Network issues happen across wireless technologies. And it's just the name of the game is figuring out how to adjust with those network issues as they happen. So that you can minimize your operational costs and get your devices back to performing the way they're supposed to faster. An example of this is, these are some statistics that we took from our own network operations center. I mentioned we have over 15 million units that we provide connectivity to today across the world. We did a 3-year deep dive into the issues that have come up. And they come across, really kind of three key buckets. And those being the device, the carrier network, or the back end, either the cloud, the application, or for legacy deployments, the data center. And we found that by and large, the majority of issues happen at the device level. Devices not maintaining connectivity, whether it because of antenna issues or power issues or SIM configuration issues. Other issues at the device level are what cause the majority of issues that impact solution performance. The network is obviously responsible for its fair share. As I mentioned, any of us, we have cell phones, we know these things happen, but they can also be issues with the back end with the cloud. That can be anything from VPN connections into a data center go down, cloud providers have outages, or even any given customer starts to have issues with their back end that's going to cause impacts to the way that their end-to-end solution is going to work. So the issues can come from many places, and understanding and the ability to understand where issues are coming from in a quick and effective and efficient way is really one of the key tricks, one of the key challenges when it comes to figuring out how to scale your deployment. It's the operational side of it. So we are going to spend a whole bunch more time talking about how do you get to the point where you can have a simpler, more robust at the same time, but also faster operational processes to spot these issues and to resolve them. And that's going to be the majority of what we're talking about today. But I wanted to set the stage that coverage is one thing, and coverage is important when you look at the solution reliability that you're going to have. But issues do come up, and so the real challenge is how do you create operational processes and monitoring processes that will scale with you as you grow. But before we get into that, we have a second poll that I'm going to toss it back to Jeremy and kick off for us.
Thanks, Evan. Yeah, the second poll is this. What cellular technology are you planning to use for your deployments going forward? Is it 2G or 3G? Is it LTE? Is it LTE-M? Is it NB-IoT, narrowband IoT? Or is it non-cellular technologies? So, what cellular technology are you planning to use for your deployments in the future? You can choose one. Is it 2G, 3G? Is it LTE? Is it LTE-M, NB-IoT, or non-cellular technologies? And that is very interesting, Evan. There's a strong preponderance here for LTE. That's caught me slightly by surprise. I mean, I knew it was popular, but I wouldn't have put it at that sort of figure. And perhaps it's less of a surprise to you.
Yeah, I think that, especially for some of the reasons I touched on earlier, the challenge with some of these other technologies is 2G, 3G is only going to be around for so much longer. So a lot of new designs, and especially many of you have built something recently that is starting to work and you want to scale, which is probably what brought you here today. Using one of the newer technologies makes sense. And the fragmentation, especially globally with LTE-M and NB-IoT, is a challenge that we see, and so I'm not surprised to see that many of you are using LTE as the technology today. We do have a section for the non-cellular technologies, and that number around 33% right now it does represent a good chunk. As a separate conversation, we'd love to hear more about what those are and how they're being used. But today we're talking about cellular, so we'll continue on.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation for another day. So let's go back to the slides.
Okay. All right, now we're going to get into the second bucket, which is controlling costs. And when someone's building an IoT solution, especially a cellular IoT solution, and we get a lot of questions around kind of the typical questions, the typical fees that are known. Cellular connectivity comes with a subscription, right? And I'm lumping SIM card fees into that as well. And you know how much data you're supposed to use, your device is supposed to use. So you buy a rate plan, a 1 megabyte, a 5 megabyte, 100 megabyte rate plan for a certain amount every month. That's kind of what a lot of the focus around cost and connectivity selection is all about, is those costs there. But there are a lot of other hidden fees that other experienced customers are aware of, whether we're talking about suspend fees or cancellation fees or early termination fees, potentially VPN fees, things along those lines that we hear that some providers charge extra for. And that's obviously another consideration you want to know of all the costs associated with signing a cellular contract, and how is that going to play into the business, and do I know all of those things? Then we get to rate plans and rate plan structure. Is it going to be a pay-per-use plan? Is it going to be a pooled plan? Is it going to be a single month plan or a prepaid plan or a multi-year plan? Depending on your business model, we've seen all sorts. And then what controls do you have to manage that rate plan? If a device is trending, sending more data than you thought, is there an option to put it on a rate plan that gives 10 times more data, for example? How can you take control over rate plans that are assigned to SIM cards and manage your cellular costs that way? And these are, by calling them the typical focus areas, and that implies that I'm about to show you some other ones to consider, I don't want to minimize the importance of these costs. They are important. They are important questions to ask and answer and make sure you're comfortable with as you plan your scale and plan to scale your business. But the reality is that most of the costs that truly impact a company's ability to scale or not are around the costs that they don't expect. Because it's when these costs balloon that business models start to fall apart. And when the business model starts to fall apart, that's when you can now no longer scale the way that you had planned to. So first, we talk about unexpected overage costs. A device was supposed to send 5 megabytes of data in any given month. And there was a firmware bug, and it started to send 20 times more data than it was supposed to. And you didn't see until the end of the month when you got your connectivity bill. And all of a sudden, your connectivity bill was 20 times higher than you expected it to be. That kind of stuff can happen if solutions are not monitored the way that they need to be. And so that kind of stuff is what I talk about when I say it can kill the business model. The other thing, operational costs. This is very, very important because these things are harder to quantify or at least prepare for. And so when you look at, if you've in the example of probably many of you here today, where you've started a deployment, you've seen some early success in whatever country you started with, you've built a support team, you built a monitoring team, and things are going well. and you're growing and you want to start growing into a new region, right? A new country, a new region, a new part of the world. How do you maintain the same level of operational effectiveness when you start to remove yourself from devices that could be now anywhere in the world? That starts to become a challenge, and if not prepared for correctly, that can start to spiral really out of control. If it starts to become, you start to need far more headcount, or it's far too manual, or far too complicated, and you just have to let certain issues go, that can start to balloon and really impact the business, your business. That's what I blow up your business model, as I mentioned. Next, around OTA costs. Inevitably, and when we get to the security section, we're going to talk about how important the ability to send OTA, and OTA is over-the-air updates. That could be a firmware update, that could be a device configuration update, that could be a security patch update. All of these things are very, very critical to any IoT deployment going out the door today. And the costs of managing updates down to devices, both the increased amount of usage that you'll have to accommodate, but then also what happens if a certain percent don't go through successfully. Manually tracking the successes versus the failures and redoing those over and over and over again becomes a big, big challenge. Then lastly, security incident costs. If there is an issue, what is the potential cost impact of that issue? They can be quite high, including potentially forced recall of devices that with some of the legislation that's being passed that can be crippling for a business that's trying to grow. So all of these costs are very important to keep in mind. And really what you need to think about how you're building, or what you're building, is how do you get to the point where you have proactive end-to-end monitoring, deep diagnostics, deep visibility, plus the support to be able to resolve those issues when they pop up. And it really needs to be end-to-end. As I had mentioned before, some issues happen at the device, some issues happen at the network, and some issues happen at the cloud. And so if you have an example of a device that's sending too much data, why is it sending too much data? Is it a device configuration issue at the device level? Is it that it's it's losing connectivity, and so it's sending data but then stopping and restarting over and over and over again? Or is the back end not realizing issues as they pop up, and then data is being sent through and the device just keeps sending? And so visibility into a lot of the questions that are up on the screen right now, right? Where is the issue coming from? Is the impact of the connectivity, does it appear to be happening as the device is trying to send information up or down? Do we think it's coverage related? Do we think it's network related? Is it particular to a certain set of geographies? How many devices? What cloud endpoints are involved, or applications? Where is it trying to send the devices to? If you don't have the ability to get answers to these questions in a reliable, clear, and efficient way, it's going to be very difficult to maintain a reliable, an operational environment that is scalable, because these unseen issues will happen, and the ability to recognize them and resolve them is going to be, I think, the most important part of, as you plan to scale, is how are you planning to address these issues that will come up? Because it's one thing if a couple of issues come up if you have a few hundred devices or 1,000 devices. But if that same percentage of issues happens across 100,000 devices, that starts to become a big, big deal. And the more devices you have out there, the harder it is to keep an eye on all of them. And so the processes and systems you put in place to monitor and ultimately resolve are critically important as you look to scale. And a couple things to keep in mind as you go about that. A few ways that we go about it and recommend that customers look to build out or build around capabilities, look to build their operational processes around. First, the ability to have a self-service portal or self-service view of connectivity and what those devices are doing on the network is not meant to distance you from your providers or your partners, but really meant to empower you to have answers yourselves without needing to go anywhere. The quickest path to a resolution is always if you can get there yourself without having to pick up the phone and talk to somebody. And so the more capabilities, the more visibility you have in the tools that your connectivity provider give you, the more capable your operations team is going to be to identify and resolve those issues. I'm going to jump down to the world-class support now right below that, because that is also critically important. At the end of the day, you should not expect yourselves to be connectivity experts. You are going to be experts in your hardware, your end-to-end solution. your end customers' business problems that you're solving. That's your area of expertise. And as you scale and grow to more regions, more networks, being an expert on all of the underlying networks and carriers and issues, that becomes really difficult. And so you really do need somebody to take that burden off of your shoulders. That's why we place such a large importance on our ability to support our customers, because this is what we do every day. We're managing these networks. We built our own networks. We own the networks. It's our job to make sure that they work, and our job to resolve those issues and help you resolve those issues as they come up. And again, from an end-to-end perspective, it's never just about the network, never just about the device. It's never just about the cloud or back end. It's about all of those things coming together. And you need, partners that can help you identify where those issues are. The other two areas I want to touch on are newer capabilities that we're starting to see, not just with our own product suite, but also in the marketplace. And they're really around how cloud environments can start to intake connectivity management workflows in a more scalable, more automated way. And that's done with pre-integrations from the network to the cloud. One of the challenges we know with deploying connectivity in new regions and new areas is making sure that you have the right interconnects in place. In fact, one of the larger challenges, probably a separate topic for another day, in the IoT industry is that the network and the cloud traditionally have operated in silos. And there's been a barrier in between them that the customer has been forced to figure out how to resolve. And so it's extra work, it's extra time, it's extra delays that frankly we don't think are necessary. By having a tighter pre-integration between the network and the cloud, what you can do is eliminate the need to go figure out your own VPNs or manage those VPNs and so forth. And you can have direct private links from the network provider directly into your cloud environment that are not only more reliable, but also far more secure. Avoid the open internet, avoid security risks and performance issues associated with that, while giving you that private link to ensure security, but also, again, minimize the amount of upfront work that you need to do to set up that integration. It comes automatically. The second and last piece is about how you can use a lot of the new tools coming out in the cloud world, in cloud environments, around using AI and ML and advanced visualization capabilities that are obviously, somebody like a Google Cloud, for example, and their suite of operational tools are very advanced, very robust. And somebody like a Google is going to be able to develop very sophisticated and technology advanced user interface capabilities. That's what what we know they specialize in. And so now the ability to take the network data that is generated at the network that will tell you if the device is registering, performing, not connecting properly, sending too much data to which endpoint, all of that information that can help you identify issues and the root cause of issues, transport that, stream it automatically into the cloud environment so that those operational tools that can put advanced machine learning based alerts, for example, on that data to identify proactively when there's going to be issues. Second, you can then match that up with your application data that may already be living in the same cloud so that you can see end to end where an issue might be coming from. An example I'll give is if a device is sending information back to the back end, the cloud, if you're only monitoring the information coming into the cloud, you may see, let's say that it's a GPS tracker. You may see that the GPS coordinates are getting sent back to back through the application as they're supposed to. It's supposed to send its location every 5 minutes, let's say, and it's doing that on schedule as it's supposed to. What you may not see is it may also be sending data separately to another undesired endpoint. Maybe it's sending information to somebody else's cloud or someone, another cloud endpoint it's not supposed to. Maybe it's pinging the AGPS server more than it's supposed to. Maybe it's doing something else that it's not supposed to. If you're only tracking the application data, you won't see that there's actually increased usage and potentially malicious usage on the other side. So bringing those together so that you can match the network data and the cloud data in a single environment, and again, the cloud environment is a great place for that. You start to see end-to-end what your devices are doing. You start to have the abilities to, at scale, monitor what devices are doing on the network. With that, we have one last poll question, then we're going to touch on security and then get to your questions.
Thank you, Evan. Before I push that last poll out, let me just remind everyone I'm going to be putting your questions to Evan at the end. So this is your opportunity to put your own question for your own deployment to an expert and get an expert's view. So don't forget to send us your questions. Here's the third poll. And the poll question is, as you plan to scale your IoT solution over the next 12 months, which geography will be your primary focus area? You can choose one. Will it be North America? Will it be Europe, Latin America, Asia, or Middle East and Africa? So which geography over the next 12 months is going to be your planning focus? North America, Europe, Latin America, Asia, or Middle East and Africa? Oh, the results are still coming in, but Evan, Europe is getting a very strong representation there, with a healthy representation for Latin America, but none so far choosing Middle East and Africa as their primary focus. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, not surprised that Europe is the leading candidate there, the winner here, especially largely because of proximity to, you know, if you're in Europe, then many of the networks and so forth are fairly standardized, and so it makes it easier to scale and expand into other countries in Europe. That's natural. That doesn't surprise me. I kind of expected a healthy mix of the rest, although I am surprised that Middle East Africa with a lot of the emerging solutions that are coming there. But certainly expect to see that continue to grow, perhaps in the next time we do this. So yeah, not overly surprised, but a good mix here.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing a lot of interesting stories coming out of Middle East and Africa. But let's get back to the slide.
Okay, so the last one we want to talk about is security, and for a couple of reasons. Security is if you're not prioritizing security, you need to be, and it's easy to you know, at least historically with IoT and M2M solutions, it has been an afterthought. You know, over the last 5, 7 years, 10 years especially. You know, felt like a kind of unnecessary cost up front, maybe unnecessary delays in what you needed to build to put the burden on some things that were viewed more as potential insurance capabilities, where, you know, what's the likelihood that something like this is actually going to happen? But what we have seen is a number of kind of high profile attacks in the IoT world over the last 5 years that the industry is responding to with regulations. We've seen regulations come in across the United States at the state level, but also at the federal level. We've seen legislation come in the across the EU, for example, that have placed a larger emphasis on security and security capabilities for anything that's going to be really a headless, effectively IoT device, wireless device. And while we don't see a lot of tangible potential ramifications there, we are starting to see that in related areas, GDPR, for example, many companies have been fined a large amount of money. So the precedent is starting to be set that not following these regulations can have very severe financial penalties down the road. And one of the beliefs is that, and I certainly think it'll get to this point, if these attacks continue and security is not addressed, that forced recall of devices are going to be something that some companies have to face. Again, this can all be crippling to somebody that's looking to grow, and the impacts of an attack can truly derail not just a deployment within a country or region, but an entire business. And so prioritizing security, we highly recommend is something that you put at the forefront, because it is the impacts to your business are so potentially great that you need to prioritize them. And there's a couple things you can do up front, things like SIM theft prevention, whether using embedded soldered on form factor SIM cards, being able to map SIM cards to the IMEI, which is the cellular device itself, so that you can know if a SIM card was removed and used for malicious purposes. But security needs to be a multi-layered set of solutions. It can't just be at the hardware level, for example, because if you give somebody enough time with the device, they're going to figure out how to get to what they want. One of the things that we're going to touch on is how you can instead move some of the security safeguards up a level to the network. And we're going to touch on a few ways that we go about that ultimately provide a more reliable security system because they cannot be reached. But the other thing I wanted to circle back to is around the OTA updates. And I had touched on this early, but OTA, over-the-air updates down devices, are critically important, especially for security purposes. If and when a security breach is detected or a security hole is identified, you need the ability to send down an update to that device to fix it remotely. You won't be able to scale a business that has to physically bring a device back to be patched from a security standpoint and then sent back out into the field. You have to have the ability to send down remote updates to devices and to do it in a smart and scalable way. And so what we're going to do is touch on these last two, a couple solutions to consider before we get into your questions. First, on the OTA system, one of the big challenges that companies have is they have the option to either buy an over-the-air management system from a partner, whether it be their device manufacturer or a platform provider. And those can work well so long as everything is done through them. Now, what if you have two different types of devices that you're going to have? Does that mean you have to have two different types of over-the-air update platform capabilities and processes? Now we're starting to introduce complexities that get tricky. Or build your own homegrown system, which many customers end up using, defaulting back to something along the lines of tracking in spreadsheets. It can be very tricky. But from a network standpoint, one of the biggest problems is network congestion as it relates to over-the-air updates, especially for those of you looking at LTM and NB-IoT, but also for those looking at LTE, it can be a challenge. If you have enough devices talking to the same cell tower, it's going to be hard to push down updates in a timely manner. Imagine that you need to push down updates to devices at a depot center or a distribution facility, and you've got 1,000 devices that need to be updated at the same time, all competing for the same cell tower. It's going to be very difficult to push that through. You're going to have to try and spend whatever connectivity costs are associated, manually track the failures, which ones didn't go through, and try again, and try again, and try again. And it may, especially in the case of a time-sensitive security patch, they may not go through in an acceptable time frame. How we go about trying to solve that problem is to provide connectivity awareness into existing over-the-air update systems. And so whether it's that device, platform we talked about or another IoT platform that has OTA capability, being able to leverage APIs from the ARIS network that tell you if a device is online, offline, ready to receive an update, talking to the same cell tower as a bunch of other devices of yours, adding that intelligence to select the network-ready devices first, increase the success rate with those devices, and then send down to the other devices when they are ready, can go a long way in increasing the efficiency of this system. And increased efficiency, lower cost is going to allow you to scale that more effectively. Then the last thing I wanted to touch on is mentioned moving network security or moving security safeguards up into the network as opposed to down at the device. And I'm not saying not to go do some of the things I had mentioned, like the SIM theft prevention and embedded SIMs and IMEI captures and all of that. That's all very important to do. But as I mentioned, security needs to be multi-layered. And so one thing that to consider is how can you lock down a device at the network level so that it can only send data to where it's supposed to go. And even in the case of a hack, of a physical hack, if someone gets a hold of the device and starts sending data where it's not supposed to, how do you prevent that from happening? The way we do it is we basically whitelist and blacklist IP endpoints for where a device needs to go so that your application, your data center, your cloud, your intended IP endpoints become whitelisted in the network. And any other IP endpoint is automatically blacklisted. So now you're looking at a system that can scale to any underlying network, any part of the world with a single solution, so that you don't need to make sure that you have figured out something for your European deployments versus your North American versus your Asian deployments. They all can be centrally managed and secured with network controls. Again, what this will do is minimize the impact of, in case there is a security breach and a device is compromised, it will not be able to do anything on the network. It can't go send to third-party IP endpoints. It can't go surf the internet It can't go download movies or stream videos or any of that that would result in high overage costs for you. It's all locked down to the network, all protected there from a single spot. And so lastly, again, to come back to just my final conclusion before we touch on some of your questions, while you want to go figure out how to maximize solution performance and figure out how to control costs and figure out how to secure your deployment, ultimately what you need in order to have a truly scalable business is a set of management capabilities that allow you to grow and allow you to remain, your operations team to remain effective in identifying issues and controlling costs in a dynamic and proactive way as opposed to a reactive way. This is really the big difference we see in a lot of companies, like I mentioned, that have scaled to 1 million units or more versus those that found issues with unexpected costs that really derailed their scaling effort. Invest in those systems, invest in those capabilities so that you can see yourself in an environment where you can effectively keep an eye on every device, not just the majority of devices, as you grow to multiple regions, multiple geographies, potentially multiple underlying technologies too. So with that, that is all I had today, and I'm going to toss it back to Jeremy so that we can get to some of your questions.
Thank you, Evan. Yeah, let's find out what the audience have been asking. Here's a question from Usa Ilmela. What is the single most important thing to consider when starting to implement scalable IoT solutions, especially in smart buildings?
And I would come back to that last point, even in smart buildings, and it's really kind of a solution independent concept here. It's the ability to understand exactly what devices are doing at all times. And so, depending on your definition of scale, which things become most important to you up front? Is it, for example, if you're going to be scaling, potentially in smart buildings, potentially not, but hundreds of thousands of devices, depending on where you are in your growth. The issues become the issue becomes managing all of that, across all of those devices. And it can happen in smart buildings. It can happen in fleet management. It can happen at asset tracking. It can happen in any vertical. How can you keep track of every device that you're doing? And the answer is that ultimately you can't do it, or every device that you're connecting. The answer is that you'll never be able to do it manually. You'll need automation. You'll need intelligent capabilities. You'll need your systems to work better together if you're going to get to the point where you can have proactive capabilities that monitor on your behalf, identify those issues, and let you react to them. Again, that's ultimately the key point, and I think the single most important thing is building in the automation from the operational and visibility perspective, regardless of vertical.
Evan, here's a good question on security. Don't remote updates also introduce a security risk by exposing the device to updates and potential hacks?
If not secured, then sure. If you're going to be, if for whatever reason you developed an over-the-air update system where any third party could talk to, send down updates to your devices, that could be a challenge. That can also be a challenge if you're using unsecured networks potentially. Open Wi-Fi networks, for example, can introduce this challenge. But part of the reason why designing efficient and smart and secure systems around your remote update processes as a whole is critically important, because this risk is not something that should prevent you from enabling over-the-air updates. You have to have the ability to send down over-the-air updates. Any solution that is going to survive out there, especially, if your device is going to be out for a long time, if you want to change the configuration of that device so that it can be used for a slightly different purpose, extend the useful life of that device with your customer, add a feature, whatever it might be, you have to do it with remote over-the-air updates. You can't do it in a scalable way by physically touching the device. And so the key there is really focusing on how do I make sure this is secure. That connection lock example I mentioned where we whitelist IP endpoints, that goes both ways. And so we can, ensure that only certain desired endpoints, your OTA server, for example, are allowed to communicate down to the device through the network, in addition to the device being able to only send out to where it needs to at the network. So there are options to make this simple, but I cannot stress enough the importance of wrapping security into the DNA of any over-the-air update system that you put out there.
Yeah, I've got a related question here, but before I go to that, Evan, one questioner One delegate says, apologies, he arrived late, and are these slides and the webinar going to be available? Yes, the answer is they will be available. You can download this from tomorrow at iot-now.com. Now, let's go to a related question. Are the security regulations that you mentioned standardized globally? Over to you, Evan.
Yeah, good question. The answer is no today. There have been a couple attempts over the years for standards bodies to regulate IoT security as a whole, but they haven't taken off. What we're starting to see is, historically we've always seen, kind of standardized regulations around the networks themselves, by and large, and those continue to be in place. But when we look at end-to-end security and really security around connected device deployment, what I would say is that we're definitely not seeing standardized global regulations yet, but a lot of the regulations that are being put in place in various parts of the world carry a lot of the same themes around preventing the device, from outside wireless communication, the ability to send down over-the-air updates, securing the data in transit, for example, and using secure networks and encrypted networks and so forth. There's a lot of those constant themes that if you are building to any one of those regulations, and and when I say regulations, they're more like guidelines today, as opposed to strict certifiable regulations, for example. But if you're building to those regulations, then the themes are pretty consistent.
Evan, question here from Richard Eaton wants to know, do you safeguard the secondary network to prevent the item being bumped off the network in an IoT car device?
So in the case of a car, for example, a connected car, they're obviously, that's a highly secure environment with the connected car deployments going out, given the potential safety ramifications, if not. Depending on which secondary network is being used and how, the answer is ultimately going to be yes. When I look to the connected car platform that we have that I'd mentioned, the Aris Mobility Suite, there are several other edge security capabilities and protocols being used and so forth. And so ultimately, what we're looking at today is the IoT device communicating with the cellular network back into the application in a single network standpoint. Now, if the concept here is a secondary network being a secondary roaming network, for example, I had given with a global SIM, you could be in any one country. If you recall the map that I had put up, it is, multiple network connectivity in any given country. The management and the security aspect is not coming at the individual underlying network provider. It's coming from the centralized Aris Fusion network. And so how we've architected the network is regardless of which underlying connectivity network is being used, said differently, regardless of which individual tower is being used, that the data is then transversing through the Aris Fusion network, which is where we've put the Fusion security implementations in place. And so it becomes a network agnostic security solution for us, and any network that our devices will roam onto eventually come back through the Aris network, which is where the security safeguards are. So long story short, ultimately, yes. And depending on the implementation of the device and exactly which secondary network is being used and how, security safeguards that account for all potential use cases are important in how we've thought about it.
Okay. We've got 3 or 4 minutes left, so time for a few more. Great questions, by the way. Thank you. Question here from Bill. What is the Fusion IoT network? Which hardware and communication protocol can connect, and what's your target customer?
Sure. Yeah. Great question about us. I love it. And so Fusion IoT Network is the Aris Cellular network that we built. We own and operate our own core infrastructure, and we have partners that provide us global RAN or cell tower access around the world. And so it is shortly legacy 2G, 3G, but LTE, LTE-M, and NB-IoT connectivity globally, 190 countries, 550 carriers. But again, the difference being is that because we control the underlying infrastructure, that gives us a lot of inherent advantages with being able to see real-time visibility on what devices are doing on the network. Again, regardless of underlying network provider or roaming carrier they may be using, that information comes through our own network elements, and so we see it all in real time and can provide immediate view of devices that are online, offline, sending too much data, not sending enough, all of those things that help customers troubleshoot. I mentioned the networks that we provide. We don't provide the hardware. We work with hardware partners or customers building hardware to connect those devices. And our target customer are companies that are building IoT solutions, connected IoT solutions that use cellular networks. That could be in any, we've mentioned a couple verticals today, whether it's smart building or connected cars, asset tracking, fleet management, healthcare, point of sale, you name it. Anything that needs a SIM card is what we focus on and provide connectivity for, IoT solutions that need a SIM card.
Okay, tough ask now, Evan. I'm going to give you one question. In fact, I'm going to bring in a second one and ask you to do it in a minute. The questioner here asks, when do you expect LTE-M to be available globally? And another questioner, who I haven't got time to throw onto the screen, is asking a very similar question about when we can expect to see more 5G exposure. So can you get both of those covered in a minute?
Let's do it. So LTE-M, I think we're a couple years away. I think we're looking at the 2022 timeframe. We see a lot of momentum with carriers building out these networks, but some are slower than others. United States, we see it pretty advanced across most networks here. Europe is touch and go depending on which country, which carrier you're looking at. But I think that over the next couple of years, we'll start to see that, which places the emphasis on, if you need global connectivity now, LTE is probably your best bet, but LTE-M should get there. As far as 5G, it depends on the use case. Both LTE-M and NB-IoT are considered 5G technologies and will live on under the 5G umbrella. One of the aspects of 5G is enabling a large-scale number of devices, especially low-power devices, and LTE-M and NB-IoT are how we're going to get there. As far as the high-performance use cases of 5G, the high reliability, the high performance, the low latency, things that connected cars, for example, are going to make use of, or consumers are going to make use of. I think we're going to see a lot more focus on the consumer side over the next couple of years. I think it's going to take a few years for the IoT use cases to make sense, for the costs to come down for large-scale IoT with those high usage and high performance capabilities. So, to me, my recommendation is 5G, unless you need high performance streaming gigabytes instantly, that kind of thing. 5G is not going to be right for you for quite a while. LTE, LTE-M, and NB-IoT are going to be around for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Those are where I would focus your efforts today.
Evan, you've done it again. Covered an enormous amount of ground in a very short space of time. Thank you very much. Well,
thank you, Jeremy. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's been brilliant, hasn't it? Really good, and great questions from the audience. Thank you so much. I'm afraid, as I say, we are out of time. To everyone watching, don't forget to bookmark our site at iot-now.com, and there you'll find news, videos, blogs, reviews, interviews, a lot. And from tomorrow, most importantly, you can stream this webinar at the site too. As I say, a big thank you to Evan Whitelock and to Eris, and most of all, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you. Thank you for joining us around the world. Wherever you are, keep safe, and in the current circumstances, we mean that more than ever. From everyone here at IoT Now, bye for now.